Hi, on the Joy of Football podcast. Today we launch straight into three of the best as we focus on the Euros and the best performances in the first round of games. Then we move on to Martin's letter from the Gantry, which is about his enthusiasm for the new initiative from Howard Webb and the referees to fast-track ex-players. We got a new segment called Summertime and the Livin Ain't Easy. And topic number one is Manchester United trying to sort out whether or not, and of course they did in the end, keep Erik ten Hag. On to Voice of Passion, which is about set play coaches and when they do a really good job. We've got a little bit of Time of Our Lives, best Euros final ever, and we finish with Stoppage Time and the most intimidating, the most electrifying atmospheres at games. Wasn't Turkey versus Georgia special? Don't forget, if you want to comment, you can email us on the Joys of Football podcast at gmail.com, joys plural. You can also go on our Patreon, in which you can find all sorts of things. Don't forget, we're going live in front of an audience with a podcast at John Lewis. Details of that coming up in Oxford Street. And don't forget as well, you can now read us on our Substack site. If you just go to the Joy of Football Substack, you'll find writing from Martin and me. Apart from that, stay where you are. Enjoy the show. The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for Xavi! Ready! Aguero!
The Joy of Football.
Hello, the Joy of Football podcast number 13 with Martin Tyler, the voice of football, and me, Neil Barnett. We've had the first round of Euros group games behind us, and we're setting up, getting ready for next week, Thursday, June the 27th, when the group stage is over, and we're going to be recording in front of a live audience at John Lewis, Oxford Street, the wine bar there, so you can come and get well served.
Of course. And well entertained, I hope. That was the word you were searching for.
So do come and join us. You can find tickets on the link wherever you're watching or in Linktree, and you will have to be a John Lewis member.
But it takes just a few seconds and it's not anything that's going to cost you anything. But it's just a formality for the store.
So come along, and 6 o'clock the show is Thursday, June the 27th. We'd love to see you. There'll be question and answer in it as well. And, well, some of us will hang around in the wine bar until it closes.
You will.
I might well. Okay, let's get on with the show. And we're going to start this week, Martin, with three of the best.
And he makes them pay.
Three of the best. He's made them pay. And that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
And we're starting with it because we've had a round of the Euros and we can really get into it. So who is your young player?
Well, there's so many to choose from, aren't there? And it's been a young players' tournament. I'm delighted to say I think part of the joy of football generally is to see the next generation come through and the next generation come through, and the fact that football as an industry is now so well organised, and it makes the most of the talents that are available, which it hasn't always been the case. So, but I'm going to go for Arda Güler of Turkey, who it just was a moment frozen in time when he scored the goal that put them in front against a very gallant Georgia team. It was just my first comparison was Messi, because I mean Messi with an I. It was the position he found himself in, the left foot, top corner, and Messi was doing that at 19 years old as well. And I wish Arda Güler
when people defended better and there wasn't so much space, but we'll get onto that later.
Maybe that helped a little bit, but it was a very competitive game. It wasn't a gimme goal.
Best game of the tournament.
Definitely for me, the game of the tournament. Yeah, and he'd had a pretty tough. He played senior football even younger in Turkey, Fenerbahce, and then moved to Real Madrid, but really the trouble started then. I don't think he played in Real Madrid's first team until after the turn of the year, 23-24, and he didn't really feature. He was on the bench for the Champions League
Re-arrived
final.
with an injury, didn't he?
Well, he certainly had an injury very early in his time there, if it wasn't the one that he brought with him. And he's been in and out, but he scored goals now for them. He scored goals for the national team before the blockbuster there yesterday. And I do think he is one for the future. It was just that it was really important in the game. It was beautifully struck. And as I say, there are plenty of others. I could have a long list here of teenagers who've done wonderful things, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. And they're filling us all with great optimism for what lies ahead in top-level football.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how quickly he gets into that Real Madrid starting 11, because might not be long. My young player is Jamal Musiala, who was one of the best players of the opening round of games for Germany against Scotland. Jamal, to me, is the modern kid. Because obviously he was born in Stuttgart in Germany, he was brought up in England, he played through the England youth ranks right up to England under 21s, and only then made the decision to play for Germany. I never saw him. He was at Chelsea for 8 years, I think. I never saw him play. He only played 2 youth team games. I remember the name. I remember thinking, who's this kid Musiala who's coming to the team? But when he left school at 16 and could have become a full-time scholar, that's when he turned his back and went to Bayern Munich. Now, the interesting thing is, for me, that he only played 2 games in the youth team, the under-18s. And if you're a schoolboy and you're that good, you'd expect to play a good half a season or more.
There have been scouts come out and said recently that they came to watch him play for Chelsea and went away and he's not quite what he's cracked up to be. So the development has come later. And then,
but he went to Bayern Munich and he was in the first team in 4-6 months and playing regularly. And of course, with Thomas Müller getting older, he's just the perfect replacement at number 10 for him. Although he started wide for Germany with İlkay Gundogan at number 10.
He was at Chelsea at the wrong time. Obviously, the young players now very much to the fore. But
with everyone injured, they wouldn't be otherwise. Don't kid yourself.
What, all the new signings under the age?
Them, but not the ones coming through.
Referring to the ones that are bought.
But the other way that he's a modern kid is that he played for England all the way up to under 21s. I'm sure most people will have seen, but if you haven't, seek it out. The photograph of him and Jude Bellingham sitting in the dressing room side by side in England shirts, probably of under 17s or just looking so young and innocent. But he had the choice of England, Germany, or Nigeria. His father's Nigerian. So this is the new way. So many people, I suppose with the freedom of movement and with more international, intercontinental relationships, you get more and more of this. I want to know from you, who could you have played for internationally?
You said you'd throw me a question that I didn't know about. There is an answer to it, though I don't think it quite works. My great-grandmother on my mother's side was Welsh, from Welshpool, mid-Wales. And I've always felt that actually England are my team. Never disguise that, except when I'm commentating. Of course, I always commentate with England being them, not us. But I've always had a bit of sympathy for Wales. Ron Davis was my favourite player growing up. It was a Wales centre forward that none of you will remember. But
Southampton. But he was the top scorer in the old First Division.
He was in his first ever season in the old First Division. He went in Southampton. He was joint top scorer actually with George Best. You will have heard of him. So there is a bit of Welshness in me, but I don't think great grandparents count. And when I did play in the level of non-league football where those I was playing against were playing for England, what is now the C team, the non-league team. It was the England amateur team then. And so there were players. And this question did come up, not for me, but time to time, well, he might be qualified for another country. But the rules were pretty strict in those days. So there's your answer.
Well, I could have played for Russia because my grandparents on my mother's side left actually Donetsk, so presumably I could have played. I play now for Ukraine, But
I think that's up for grabs, as they say.
Yeah, but when the Soviet Union split up, if you were born in the old Soviet Union, I think you could play. FIFA said you could play for anyone of the individual countries within it.
I haven't mentioned this before, but I mentioned it with the Slovaks who won with Czechoslovakia. They won. The 15 of the 22 were Slovaks when they won the Euros in 1976, Czechoslovakia. Yeah. Although Panenka, the most remembered one, is still a Czech, was a Czech. And in 1960, the first winners of the very first Euro were the Soviet Union. And I researched it, and 3 were Georgian. Yeah. So, for all this talk about the first Georgians to play in a major tournament, 3 of them were in that a very small tournament, the European Nations Cup, as it was called then, not to be confused with the Nations League of now. So, I think the choice makes it difficult for the international managers. Have you got to promise somebody a cap to get them into the fold? And one favourite story of mine, Stuart McCall, born in England, I believe, and played for England under 21s, but very much of Scottish background, was about to come on in a competitive international. That was the line that you had to draw. If you played in a competitive international, even under 21 level, that was you aligned to that country. And he warmed up so far away, and he said, I'm not ready to come on. He knew at that moment that he was Scottish, not English.
Brilliant. I didn't know that, yeah. By the way, I could have played for Wales. Like you, I had a grandmother, well, not great-grandmother, I had a grandmother who was born in Wales, so I could have. So mine was England, Wales, or
I've only just found this out in the last couple of years, this Welsh side of my family, and one of these ancestor sites that come up from time to time. So in the course of the summer, I'm going to go to Welshpool and have a forage around and see who and what I can come up with.
Old player.
Well, this is a bit of a personal, and there's a story to go with it. I'll go for Roberto Martinez because, yes, he's a friend of mine, and he is a very talented manager and coach. And the story that I love to tell about him, and his substitutions were excellent. They got Diego Jota on, who then
should have started.
Had a goal.
Should have started.
Well, that's the Cristiano Ronaldo debate. We could fill a whole podcast with that. But he came on, had what looked a perfectly good goal, disallowed because Ronaldo was marginally offside. And then he brought on Pedro Neto, who we all know is a great talent, but is so often injured. And he fired the ball across, and Francisco Conceição scored from very close range. He could hardly miss, but he was another youngster who was in there, and he'd just been brought on. So it was a perfect set of substitutions and a nice family connection, because Sergio Conceição got a hat-trick in the Euro finals 24 years earlier, almost to the day, when Portugal beat Germany in the year 2000. So I'm going to go with Robbie because I can tell you about his competitive instincts. In 2010, I was working for an American channel, and they World Cup in South Africa. He was part of the punditry team, as were some very famous people. And if you remember, the football in South Africa was a slightly new type. They're all round and panelled and everything. But so we went out to check it out, and they put on a game for us. So our squad with people behind the scenes and everything. So we had like Shaka Hislop was in goal for one of the teams. Steve McManaman played, and Ruud Gullit played. Now I was on the other team. I was on Robbie Martinez's team, and Gullit, who had a knee injury, supposedly went in goal for the other team. So I think we were 7-3 up. Not with any great contributions from me, but Robbie did very well. We were 7-3 up. And then Ruud Gullit says, right, next goal wins it. And not only that, he comes out of goal. So he starts to influence the game. And of course, McManaman scores the goal. And they celebrate like they'd won the World Cup. And so we'd all gone on a team bus together. And we're sitting on the bus going back. And I'm sitting in the seat behind Robbie Martinez. And he turns around and he goes, we won that game. I don't know what they're on about. We won the game. That goal should never have won them the game. And he was so upset about it. Even when I see him now, I go, we did win the game in South Africa, didn't we? And he'll smile about that. So he's got a very genial media personality, and he is like that most of the time. And but he's deeply competitive, and he made Portugal, who needed to be deeply competitive, of course he's relatively new in the job. He did very well. So he's my old player.
Interesting that you did the 2010 World Cup with you. I did the 2014 World Cup with Sirius XM touring the pubs of the USA where it's best to watch football. That was a really hard job. I don't remember anything about it whatsoever for obvious reasons. But he was a television pundit based in the USA for that World Cup. And he made a significant impression on American viewers and was very, very popular.
He's an impressive man.
Yeah. My old player, for obvious reasons, is one of the loves of my life, N'Golo Kante. Called back into the France squad, age 33, selected ahead of Tchouaméni, ahead of Camavinga, because he is the greatest ball hunter of all time. That's what I've always called him, the greatest ball hunter of all time. And he gave a performance for France against Austria. That was just one of the performances of the first round. It was all the old N'Golo. Now, he has had injury problems since the 2019 Europa League final. We've talked in the past, and I've held a certain amount of disdain for sporting directors. I don't hold a disdain for sporting directors because they're sporting directors. I just don't like the way that the job is defined in Premier League clubs as opposed to clubs across the rest of Europe.
I think disdain's an understatement, by the way.
Yeah, and well, but what people might forget, particularly if they're not Chelsea supporters, is that after Michael Emenalo left the club, Marina Granovskaya, who was originally Roman Abramovich's PA, became the director of football. I mean, quite extraordinary. So when Maurizio Sarri was hired as manager and said, I want to buy Jorginho, I always wanted to ask the question. Of course, you never could because you are not allowed, you never get to director of football.
Not yet.
Did anybody say, what are you going to do with Kante, with N'Golo? And clearly no one said that. So Jorginho came into a 4-3-3 shape as the pivot. And poor N'Golo, the greatest ball hunter of all time, had to go into an attacking midfield position that just didn't suit him. And it got to the Europa League final at the end of that season. And he was injured. And Jorginho can't defend. Even he'd admit that. So they got N'Golo fit, and he played next to him, injured, and wrecked his knee. And it's been a problem. It was a problem ever since. And his last season at the club, 2022-23, he had hamstring surgery in the end. Now, I'd love to know, is N'Golo Kante back to being the best ball hunter in the world because of surgery that was successful? Or is it because he spent a year playing in Saudi Arabia with that climate, which must be good for his muscles, and with that lack of intensity of football compared to the Premier League, which must be good for his recovery? I don't know.
Well, it's probably a combination, isn't it?
But you know, people often get injured and are injured for an awful long time and do recover. And you can go from, Ryan Giggs, for years, his career was wrecked by hamstring injuries every season, and those were the seasons that Manchester United never won the league. And then he'd come back and he was fit again, and they'd win the league. He was so critical to the success of those years, and you can get it right in the end. You can get over it, and you can get back if you've still got the raw materials. And N'Golo Kante, age 33, has all the raw materials.
Well, you've given me a perfect link to my player, who has made an amazing recovery, not from an injury, although I suppose you could use that word, Christian Eriksen, who 3 years ago, well, we wouldn't thought that he would be able to talk about him as a person, let alone as a footballer. And the recovery, the wonderful reaction from everybody, including the English referee Anthony Taylor, who deserves a mention still, all these years later.
His finest moment as a referee.
And everybody who was involved in that got Christian Eriksen back alive. It's quite a dramatic thing to say, but it's true. And when he scored that goal, which wasn't an easy goal, it tested his technique. It tested his, actually, I saw him play as an out-and-out centre forward for Ajax against Manchester City in a win in Amsterdam, and it was a surprise to everybody. He'd not played there, really, but he won the game and played brilliantly. A sign of many things to come. And as he's got older, perhaps he hasn't got into those goal-scoring positions so often. Often his goals have come from set pieces. Or he one touch to control, and it was just not quite perfect, but he had to reach for the half volley and tuck it away in great style. And it was, goodness me, to be alive was a sensational achievement, thanks to the help that he got, but his own determination to get through those dreadful minutes. And to be even involved in football is a minor miracle, and to be out on the pitch is a major miracle, and to score that goal is whatever is beyond a major miracle. I had tears in my eyes watching it because it's a human story. It's not a sad thing. There's not a sad thing about it whatsoever, but he's so matter of fact that I'm sure deep down he has conversations with those very close to him about the miracle nature of it all, but to try and get him to talk about it as we do, he's so down to earth. And I actually saw him. He was heading off to the World Cup after Fulham played. Manchester United played at Fulham, the last Premier League game for both clubs before the World Cup in 2022, and he was heading off to the airport. Obviously to get out to Qatar or to link up with Denmark, maybe back to Denmark first. I don't know, but he was the team had gone. He was going his separate way, and I walked past him. And I said, "You going to the World Cup then?" "Yep." Yeah. And there was no, "Well, I'm a lucky guy" or anything like that, which I'm sure he knows and feels. But it's an amazing story.
He was his first words were pretty emotional, wasn't it, when he woke up after the heart attack? Mm-hmm. Because he was supposed to say what's happened, and he was told, and his response was, "Effing hell, I'm only 29." So yeah, he felt emotional then.
But a realistic comment. I mean, he scored the winner for Spurs at Manchester City on his birthday, and I thought, well, that's a commentator's dream, isn't it? Really. But again, it's my birthday. Yeah, we won the game, but it's good for the team, and that's the kind of guy.
I didn't know he played centre forward for Ajax because I was at Old Trafford for the first Erik Ten Hag game when they were at home to Brighton and got well beaten. Graham Potter's Brighton and got well beaten, and he played centre forward that day. So obviously that he knew the Dutch history that I didn't know.
But I don't know how many times he did it, but he did it that day. And it was too much for Manchester City.
My player is Nicola Barella of Italy and Inter Milan. I get sick and tired.
I think it's Barella. Barella's a wine.
Yeah. Sorry, Barella. I'm just thinking.
I believe it's a very good wine.
It is a very good wine. Yeah. I'm just thinking of our live recording at John Lewis in the wine bar and what I might drink. So Nicola Barella. It's about the players. It's not about the managers. People, media want to make it about the managers, and we're responsible for that. They've got to have a pre-match press conference, they've got a post-match press conference, they've got to speak live, they've got to speak to the rights holders and do individual interviews, and it's about the players. You can. I can't remember who it was originally who said, it's easy to be a great manager. All you need is great players. Was it Brian Clough, somebody who said that?
Well, it's true.
Yeah. So I want to tell you why Nicola. There were a lot of candidates for goal of the first round of games. I haven't really heard Barella mentioned in those, but his was an absolutely fabulous goal as well. But for me, he's the midfielder who is the heir to Modric and De Bruyne in world football more than anyone. And he has, if you look at his CV, he won Serie A with Antonio Conte as his manager. He then went and won the Euros with Roberto Mancini as his manager. He then got to the Champions League final and won Serie A again with Simone Inzaghi as his manager. doesn't matter who his manager is. They're irrelevant. He is the best midfielder in Italy and one of the best midfielders in the world. And he's a creative midfielder. He's a horrible little sod. He spends the whole game arguing with the referees. How he's going to cope with only the captain talking to the referees? I think Inter Milan and Italy will have to make him the captain because nothing will stop him bad-mouthing the referees. He's a little player. He gets stuck in and he can be nasty.
And he can score a goal. And
he's got quality. He's got vision. He can exercise the quality and he can finish. And he is the heir. I think he's 27 now, and he's in his prime, and he's a player worth watching every time he plays. Right, that is three of the best, young, old, and general player. And from there, we are leaving the Euros a little bit, but we'll come back to them. And we are going to Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
Yeah, I'm veering away from the Euros a little bit with this offering today. The joy of football comes in many guises, and my heart skipped a beat recently because of an initiative from the Players' Union, the PFA, and those who govern refereeing in England, the PGMOL. They are, and I have to say, at long last, giving an opportunity to former players to be fast-tracked into a career as a referee. Around 120 candidates are exploring the opportunity. Players who haven't quite made the grade could have a pathway into the Premier League in a different, and you could argue, a more responsible role. Those whose careers have been finished with an injury that means they can't take the physical contact of the game but can still run can now get a second chance. Never played the game is still a derogatory remark when contentious decisions are debated in the stands or in the media. It is a general truth, though not quite 100%. Current referee Simon Hooper was a youngster at Swindon Town. The Premier League's best assistant referee, still, Darren Cann, was once on the books of Crystal Palace. John Moss, who's recently retired, was a decent non-league midfield player. But going back even further, Steve Baines made it into the middle after making almost 450 Football League appearances. The only referee to have bucked the trend, and even as a very late entrant, he had 8 years in his second career. He should have been a prototype, but politics and personalities meant no one followed, or was allowed to follow, down that path. From the outside, Baines appeared to have that extra factor as a referee because of his huge experience as a professional footballer. We've had full-time professional referees for over 20 years now. Prior to that, they were workers with a whistle. Jack Taylor, arguably England's finest official of all time, ran a butcher's shop in Wolverhampton. In his own words, he took off his apron and went off to referee a World Cup final. And very well he did it too. The 1974 final, in which he awarded penalties to both nations, West Germany and the Netherlands. The argument has always been from within the refereeing community that you need to start when you're not long out of primary school. I saw this at first hand watching my own son play underage football. A regular, youthful refereeing face on that circuit was Charles Breakspear, who was barely a year older than the players. He's now taken charge of over 400 games in professional football. Michael Oliver, up there with the very best, started at 14 years old and was officiating in the Premier League at the age of 25. So the current system has its values, but the one obvious problem is that it restricts the opportunity to play the game. Now, this new move is part of the Premier League-funded Elite Referee Development Plan, which aims to provide opportunities to potential referees to progress to the higher levels of the game within a shorter time frame than usual. Those 120 or so former and current players who've taken up this offer from the PFA and the PGMOL will be whittled down to 10 or 12. They will be given their chance in the here and now. It could restrict the avenues to the top of those who are young and ambitious and in the current system, but if they're good enough, they will still make it to an elite level, and the game is crying out for more officials. If it doesn't work, it will shut up those detractors, some of them ex-players themselves. Long overdue, it has to be tried, but the newbies carry quite a responsibility. They are pioneers, and it will not be a stroll in the park.
I think I remember Jack Taylor refereeing. Obviously, I think Howard Webb is as good as any referee in top flight English football has been
in the professional refereeing time, whereas Jack was an amateur.
But I think I've said to you before. I think the move from amateur to professional referees, or at least they were paid, but a pittance per game, was a mistake. Not because they didn't need to become professional, but because it papered over the cracks and it didn't ask the question, how do we get the best people for the job into the job? And I do think the whole teenage thing has been an absolute diabolical failure that makes me think of the Freemasons. And if you're a Freemason, I apologise. But it makes me think, of a group that looks after their own, which is what the referees associations have always done. And
this is a good break.
This is brilliant. Yeah. And when you say if it doesn't work, it will shut people up. But if it doesn't work, it's the first step to a number of steps to find out how we get better people, better suited into running the game, and we get rid of this whole thing of officials who are officious and start getting people who serve the game and bring the joy of football to it in a much better way. And hopefully the laws of the game will change then as well. But that's a different
maybe
issue.
We need to get some ex-players onto IFAB as well.
Absolutely, definitely. There you go. Well, Arsene Wenger's on it now, and everything he says is moronic. Sorry, Arsene, but it is. It's moronic. Okay. Letter from the Gantry. We'll be watching that very closely. And remember, you can now read Martin's letters from the Gantry. We're putting them up on our Substack site, also called The Joy of Football, with Martin and me. We're catching up. We're putting them up there. And there's other writing on there as well.
To show we can write as well as talk.
Yeah. Some would say. Right. Now to our new segment. Our new segment for the close season. And this one is called Summertime and the Livin Ain't Easy. Because yes, during summer, football clubs have got to get their houses in order. So this is number one. And number one is Manchester United making the decision to retain Erik ten Hag as manager.
Well, first of all, I want to speak up for Erik ten Hag's demeanour over the best part of 3 weeks. He had to wait for this decision to know that other people were being interviewed to be his potential replacement. That must be agonising. I mean, he's a strong man. Dutch football mentality is very strong. Don't ever underestimate it. And I thought he came out with some interesting comments about this procedure, which he recognised obviously he was told it was going on. He didn't have to read about it in the papers, although there was a lot of comment on it that wouldn't have been allowed in Dutch football. Everything had to be done. You have to get rid of your manager before you actually find a replacement. So I think his dignity in this situation, and I commentated on the FA Cup final, it was a splendid, defiant and very disciplined performance from Manchester United, and therefore from the coach that put the plan into place. I think it was his day. We can talk about, the performances of the individual players and the team as a whole, but he was under huge pressure. And I'm sure we all feel, had he lost that final, we'd be having a different conversation about a different Manchester United manager. So they've had a look around, and I've experienced this in my own very low-level non-league coaching career. The manager that I've worked with, Alan Dowson, has had a couple of occasions where we have known that the directors at a non-league club are talking to somebody else. And once, while we were actually playing a game, we knew what was going on in the boardroom. So, I mean, I don't think it's a nice thing. I don't think it was the right way to do it. I mean, there is two sides to every story, but the point of view from the board of directors and Sir Jim Ratcliffe himself as to how this could happen. But he's a businessman, and maybe it happens in business. I don't know, possibly does. But it wasn't the right way to go about it. And if you end up saying, well, we've reviewed it for 2.5 weeks or whatever it was, and you're not going to stay, I think maybe we've had a more sympathetic look at it. So for Erik, it's worked out okay. But how does he go back? One thing I do know from Alan Dowson's experience is you're only once in a good position with the board as a manager, and that's when they've just hired you. That if you've got to ask for X, Y, and Z, if you don't ask then, you'll never get it. So I think he can go back with that, and I'm sure he will have one or two things to say. And it's not just going to be a lapdog for the new philosophies of the club. He's got to say, look, hang on a minute. If I'm going to stay, I need this and this, and I'm sure he will. I think the man himself has come through it very well, and I wish him all the luck as a manager second time around, if you like.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very important, because this is another example of how it's about the players and not about the manager. And I think Manchester United have been an absolute disgrace. I can say that as a Chelsea man over all this, because. Look, Erik ten Hag does not come across well in the media, I don't think. His command of English is a very guttural command, and his style of English, and he comes across as very serious, and I've heard that he's not very serious all the time, and that he can be quite human and
sociable.
Yeah, and he comes across as well as a restricting manager rather than a liberating manager to me at times. But his chosen centre-back pairing was Varane and Martinez, and he didn't have it all season. His centre-forward was not good enough. Haaland may become good enough, but he wasn't good enough. Rashford went off the rails. And his signings, and we assume they were his signings because they were his ex-players, Anthony and Onana, for me, were disasters. But
what about Martinez? You just praised him. He was a signing.
Well, yeah, Martinez did well for him.
Yeah. But has hardly played.
And Luke Shaw hardly played last season either. And the backup centre, left back,
Tyrell
Marcia, was injured for most of the season as well. What is he supposed to do? What is he supposed to do? And why did Manchester United not get a more mature striker than Haaland? Why not? They didn't have a backup. What was the plan? And it's about the players, and the players weren't good enough. In the cup final, he got Varane and Martinez back together, and it worked out. And he went back to Rashford, and he didn't play Anthony, and it worked out. He came third the previous season, or fourth, I can't remember, third, I think, and got them into the Champions League.
Won the Carabao Cup.
Yeah. So there are too many changes of managers. There's too many people tinkering with the first team. I'm not talking about Manchester United now. I'm talking about generally. There's too much tinkering with the first team. They have made the right decision for me. Whatever I think of his what seems to me a restrictive style of management, they've made the right decision in the way that I said the other week that Leeds have made the right decision in keeping their coach, David Farke, even the Daniel Farke. That's why he's the commentator, and I'm just the talk out my rear end.
But he's going to be under amazing scrutiny. And whether that will work or not.
If you keep changing your manager, you keep going back to square one. You don't move on. You keep going back to square one.
In some ways, and perversely, and I'm thinking twice about saying this, but how would it have been if he said, "Sorry, you've been messing around with it. You've had other people in your offices to talk to. No, I'm off."
But they've done well.
And that's an emotional thing, and he is a very strong-minded, and he doesn't let emotion get carried. I do think some Dutchmen speak fantastic English, and Erik's it is, as you say, very guttural. And he is. I've met him a few times. He goes out on the pitch before the game, so I'm commentating. You can have a chat with him, and he knows when the chat should finish, but he does give you the chat for as long as he feels is appropriate. And I quite warm to him in that respect. So I wish him well, and there's not a manager out there that I wouldn't wish well, but these circumstances are pretty extraordinary. And as I've said to you before, I think commentators will be taking shots not just of the manager, but of those who are controlling the policy of the football at the club as well. I think it's time we recognise that there's more responsibility than the guy who just has to go up to the press conferences before and after the game. And it's tough. Same thing, 2 years, injuries, and all the questions pretty much from halfway through his first year, are you good enough to do this job? And he's won trophy. What's the thing that's held against managers? Gareth Southgate's done a fantastic job with England, hasn't won a trophy. The critics are out. Erik ten Hag's won 2.
There you go. Summertime and the living ain't easy. We'll come back to that. Right, we're now going to one of our favourites, Time of Our Lives. And we're back to the Euros, and we're just going to give you the best Euros final you've seen.
Well, I think the best story is 1992, Denmark, who weren't even qualified for the 8 nations that took part in Sweden. That was the last one before it went to 16 for the Euros in England in 96. And so they came from the beach and then they went home with a trophy. It was an amazing transformation, really. I think sometimes that it might suit the Danish temperament, actually. That, there was no great build-up to it, no great hype for it. They were actually, if they'd lost all their games 4-0, then everybody would say, well, they've been on the beach, Thanks for turning up and making up the numbers. That's what they did. But there was a very, very emotional, personal story in there, which I've referred to in an earlier podcast about one of the Danish players, Kim Vilfort, who had a young daughter at the time who was suffering with a terminal illness, and he scored in the final against Germany. And there are, I say that not everybody knew all about it. It wasn't a secret. It was something you could mention on the air in the commentary that I was doing for television Australia. But it was hard to watch after that because there were so many tears in your eyes, But he got a winner's medal and he performed magnificently professionally. His family encouraged him to play. I led to believe that he did go home in between the games. Obviously, Sweden to Denmark, it's not a massive journey. So that side of it. So for me, emotionally and entertaining and against all the odds, which we love the underdogs, don't we?
And the other goal was scored by an Arsenal player who never scored.
Not in John Jensen, John Jensen scored, he was an amazing defensive midfield player. a lot of what do they say? A lot of ducks in alignment in that particular week or two, but I still can't. When you think it's the country of Christian Eriksen as well, I can't think of those two events, both in European finals, without being quite emotional about it, to be honest.
I'm going for the 2000 final, France against Italy. The whole tournament was lit up by Zinedine Zidane for me, but Portugal had a wonderful tournament with Rui Costa playing the number 10 role, both of them playing 4-2-3-1. And
Portugal, I believe, in that tournament came from behind to win their opening game
against England,
as they have just done to win their opening game. At least 20 years
true.
later.
But that was 2-0, I think, and they came back.
It was 2-0.
3-2.
They scored 2 very early goals.
And Luis Figo hammered an absolutely glorious top corner 25-yarder to make it 2-1. I think Figo isn't talked about enough now because he was in the era of Zidane and then Ronaldinho and Ronaldo and Roberto, but Luis Figo was some player, wasn't he?
He's talked too now because he's always about.
Yeah,
I think he must work for FIFA or UEFA. He's a wonderful ambassador as much as he was a wonderful player. So that was a very good tournament. And didn't Portugal then go and beat England 4 years later, coming from behind as well?
But the final was the one final decided by a golden goal. By David Trezeguet, I think.
It wasn't the one final. Because 1996 was decided by a golden goal.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
Oliver Bierhoff.
Yeah. But
against they were the Czech Republic then. They'd been Czechoslovakia had finished.
Good Czech Republic team, by the way.
Yeah, it was.
But so
Poborski.
Yeah, with the chip.
Yeah,
Which got him a Manchester United job, but he never really did at Old Trafford.
No, and was it against Portugal?
Can't remember, but it was a brilliant goal.
It might have been.
It was a brilliant goal, and he had proper footballer's hair, Poborski.
He did. Yeah, those days have gone. I was actually watching sort of a step back, watching a lot of the games on television rather than being in the grounds, and recognising how the commentators, we have very different ways of identifying. There are lots of different ways of identifying players. Numbers, obviously, of course, are the great boon, and then the players' names on the shirts also add to that. But if someone's got a strapping on, but it used to be the hair, because you'd have a whole range of length of hair, colours of hair. Now everyone's got streamlined haircuts, and it's a very, there aren't too many that stand out because of that. But yeah, Poborski was a dream.
My old mate Giorgio Canalia, who won Serie A with Lazio the first time they won it, and was Italy's centre forward in the 1974 World Cup, and then went to New York Cosmos in the prime of his career, unlike everyone else who was going there, Pele and Beckenbauer and everyone who were at the end of their careers, and scored loads of goals in NASL, North American Soccer League.
He played in Wales.
He did. Yeah.
Maybe he was as qualified for Wales as I.
Yeah,
myself.
He grew up in Cardiff and he played for Swansea.
Yeah.
When he died, actually, Brendan Rodgers was manager of Swansea and came on the radio to talk about him. But Giorgio always used to say, in my day, he said, at the end of the game, it was all about who spent longest in the mirror putting gel on their hair. The difference now is it's before the game that they stand in the mirror and put gel on their hair.
I'm going to out a friend of mine, and he's a great bloke, and I love him dearly. We had a commentators team in the 70s and 80s, and in fact only finished, because it was always Sunday charity games, I only finished when the Premier League started. And he used a hairdryer and moisturiser, which I have used ever since, because I realised what a sensible guy he was, as well as the first in front of the mirror, Jim Rosenthal. Jim, you deserve a mention, because we shared some really good times together. And we didn't do too badly as a strike partnership, you know.
Brilliant. Right, that is Time of Our Lives. Now we go on to Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
With, of course, the voice of reason coming from Martin Tyler. My passion this week is set-piece coaches, because my probably favourite individual moment of the whole of the first round of games in the Euros was when Scotland had a free kick in the Germany half, and the centre-backs went up. They had a chance to put the ball into the penalty area. They didn't. And then there was pictures of Steve Clarke, the Scotland manager, turning around and berating the set-piece coach. And this is about set-piece coaches this week. I have heard Jason Cundy, who I watched play centre-back for Chelsea, goodness knows how many times, and then Tottenham and Ipswich, on his commentaries, every time there's an attacking free kick and the centre-halves go up, and the ball doesn't go into the penalty area, he goes absolutely ballistic and says those centre-backs will be fuming that they've got to spend more energy getting back into their own half now, sprinting back because the ball hasn't gone in. I am sick, Martin, of corners being defended in the Premier League. Every club does it, all 11 back, nobody on the posts, and then people say why they conceded a goal. The penalty area is too crowded. Get 2 or 3 people upfield if you're defending it. The attacking team will have to take 2 or 3 or 4 back, and you'll have more room to be dominant in your defending in the penalty area. Now, you've spoken about referees and did they play the game? Set-piece coaches, did they play the game? I'm talking this episode a lot about, it's more about the players than it is about the management. I'll take you back to the 1960s. Chelsea used to have routines on set plays and score goal after goal. Who organised those at the training ground? The 21, 22-year-old midfielder, Terry Venables, who of course went on to become a top-rated manager. But he did it as a player. Let the players organise it. And if you want to bring in a set-piece coach, make a senior player who's going into coaching do it. I mean, back to my Chelsea, why didn't they offer the job to Thiago Silva? Why did they have this great argument about who was going to come in, or if anyone was going to come in and be the set-piece coach? What's so difficult about organising a set-piece? Get us someone who's played it to organise it, not someone who does it on a piece of paper and works it all out. Because as far as I'm concerned, set-pieces are not something that has improved under set-piece coaches.
Well, there's a lot of issues about what you've said. I think the first thing that strikes me is the only reason you have a set-piece coach now is you can afford one. I've worked in non-league football on the training ground for the best part of 20 years. And between us, we divvied up the set pieces and tried to work out something that would be simple and effective, both attacking and defending. Had we been a richer club, I'm sure we would have found somebody to do that full time, because it does take a lot of detail, and it is a case of balancing a lot of factors, one of which is, have you got players who want to head the ball in the first place? Because obviously we're talking mostly about balls aerially played into the box. Have you got a goalkeeper in your team when you're defending set pieces you feel confident to come out and deal with it? So what's the responsibility on individual players? Personally, I used to ask I knew in my non-league playing days where I wanted to go as an attacker, and players do have favourite spots. So I've talked about this to current managers, really. If you say, I want to make a run to the near post, I get goals like that, you let him do it. You find a way to balance that about the rest of it. Of course, not to the exclusion of everybody else, because 4 or 5 people may want to make the same run, you know, so you have to work out through that. And also, my experience, and I've watched England in the past having set-piece sessions, players get bored pretty quickly. Repetition does improve, and that's why a lot of set-piece coaches do have success, because it is repeated and there are various variations. So much data is driven now on what the opposition did, how did they defend corners in their last game, what can we do? We surely must, we can find space here. A lot of factors go into it, more than perhaps you think, and I'm impressed with the detail. Personally, I always believe that the more touches you have in the build-up to an attacking set piece, the more likely it is to go wrong. So if putting the ball in, I mean, you mentioned, going back to Terry Venables, who was a manager at 20-year-old in his head. We've all seen people. Danny Murphy was like that. As a 17-year-old, his club manager at Crewe said to me, he'll be a manager, but he's not. He's a pundit. But it's the same principle of thinking about the game. I think players' attention spans are not great, so you have to work on something that they can remember, and even the signals. I'm always looking to see bouncing the ball is a signal, and one arm raised and 2 arms raised, and try and work out as a commentator what did they try and do. And then the ball's got to be put into the area that works as well. It's not easy to put in a corner that goes exactly where you want it to. But you mentioned Venables. I'm thinking of Steve Bold and Tony Adams and at Arsenal, the Bold flick on at the near post produced so many goals. West Ham had great near post attackers, and going back to Martin Peters and Jeff Hurst, that was their one move, really. But now there are so many options, and there's so much time to look at it, so much more data, so many more visual clues to show players. It's desire for me. The word is contact. That's what the coaches talk about. Get the first contact. If you're defending, get the first contact. You've got a very good chance of clearing the danger. If you're attacking, get the first contact. You've got a better chance of scoring with a flick on or something like that. So I'm for the set-piece coaches, but the truth is they wouldn't exist if the game wasn't awash with money, because there's not such a word as an ordinary coach. A proper qualified coach can do set pieces. But these guys think about nothing else, and they celebrate like they've scored from the set pieces, and why not? And they should be berated if it doesn't go. The manager is in on the plans, and if it doesn't go right, then you've got to turn around and say, well, what went wrong with that? At least explain what went wrong. And if you're trying to desperately to get a goal, you get a corner. And I remember England v Iceland, when England got knocked out of the Euros in 2016. I think it might have been Wayne Rooney taking a corner right at the end. I think, get this one right, and it's 2-2, and England stay in and win in extra time, which never happened. So they're vitally important, and if you can get them right, if your percentages go up through a set-piece coach...
Yeah, if you can get it right, and it's back to the players again.
But it's not as simple as you think,
Yeah.
Neil, because
No, I know.
It is putting the ball exactly where...
Yeah.
And we've seen Danny Carvajal score in the Champions League final, the smallest player in the penalty area, because the ball was...
With his second header. On goal from a corner in the game.
Well, twice they got it right, and yes, you're right, the opposition should have recognised they got lucky with the first one and didn't deal with the second one, the opposition being Dortmund, of course. Yeah. So it's a very complicated issue, but I'm for the detail. Because
I'm for the detail.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there's too much, you can have too much detail. In the end, the players have got to perform. And the interesting thing to me, the big difference that a coach has made in this area, the biggest difference that I've seen isn't in set plays, it's at throw-ins, when Liverpool got that throw-in coach. Because throw-ins are something that happen much more frequently. Throw-ins are something where you need to get into open play and get an advantage from that. And it's very difficult because everybody can just mark man for man. And Liverpool somehow not only found ways of getting out of their own half at throw-ins, because a throw-in in
it's a set piece
in the defensive third of the pitch can be a very difficult.
It's a restart, and you've got the chance because you can control where you throw it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the opposition can pen you in if it's in the defensive third of the pitch.
Which is why you throw it 30 yards down the line and get out, but you lose possession probably.
But Liverpool not only found a way of stopping the opposition getting good possession from throw-ins, they also found a way of getting themselves good possession from throw-ins. And I thought it really improved their play, much more than a set-piece coach improved their play.
Well, Brentford are the best, I think, because their percentage of set-piece goals, chances anyway. I'm not sure about the actual detail of goals to set-pieces. But they are, Thomas Frank very kindly let me into a training session just before their very first Premier League game against Arsenal, you remember, and they scored in the game from it, and they put a lot of dependency on it. So no, it is really. But I would just say to Austin McPhee, as the person you're talking about, if you've got such long hair, you're the most recognisable person on the gantry. So if anybody said, of course, if you work, it works well. And obviously the connection with Villa, John McGinn was taking up interesting positions from the set pieces, offside position. Sam Allardyce worked brilliantly on it. Tony Pulis worked brilliantly on it. You know, some coaches, if you've got limited resources, it's a bit of a surprise, really, that Arsenal, who have had such a wonderful season, have relied a lot on it. Well, they've made it work. Yeah. Maybe that's the element that didn't work. I know they, again, didn't quite get to where they wanted to be, but the improvement in that sense, and it's Nico Jova, isn't it, who's there.
But they got a lot of big players.
Yeah, well,
helps.
Tony Pulis' team had a lot of big players as well. I mean, if you've got big players, but not all big players want to head the ball, and not all centre-halves, and you talk about Jason Cunningham, he probably did want to head the ball. But there are centre-halves who go up who never score.
I heard a great story about Tony Pulis. Stoke let in a goal that he was unhappy with, and he went into the following Monday. He went into the IT room to watch it back with the IT people who do all and they're not IT people, but the preparation people who do all the videos for the players and everything, and they have great input into the tactics. And you watch this goal back, and I think the shortest player in the back four, being Tony Pulis, was about 6'2", and this goal was conceded. And he looked round to the other guys, and he went, "We need a taller back four," and that's Tony Pulis. That's tactics, Tony Pulis. Right,
but you make the use of what you've got, and the set pieces at least it is a structured situation.
But I just think it's over complexed. And I think that the people who are there can get on with it and make it work. I don't think it's a full-time job at all.
Well, if I do work again in non-league football, Neil, I'll invite you down to a training session and you can organise the set pieces for me.
Yeah. 2 up at corners. Right. That's it. Apart from stoppage time.
Stoppage time.
Okay, stoppage time. The best game in the first round of Euros was the extraordinary encounter between Turkey and Georgia. And not just because of the football, although the football was brilliant, but also because of the atmosphere. And I can't remember a game coming across on television with such a vibrant atmosphere. And I wanted to use it in order to ask you, and I'm going to come up with a Turkish story in a minute, what is the most intimidating, electrifying atmosphere you've ever experienced at a football match?
I think there's two issues. Intimidating is different to electrifying, really. The two ones that I can recall recently, one I've mentioned here a few times, I get to talk about a lot, was the Aguero goal, obviously. And Mark Hughes saying to me, who was the manager of QPR, it's the noisiest moment he'd ever heard in a football ground. And so that obviously was electrifying. That would be one. And the other one was, it was a game that worked out well for Tottenham, but when they played Arsenal with a full house at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I think we've talked about this before, I could only name the players. There was the din, the acoustics, of course, are very specially designed at one of the many brilliant features of that stadium. And it was very hard to have any sort of thought about a comment as opposed to identifying the players, and it was deafening. So that's when I've been to Turkey. The one when David Beckham missed a penalty, that was a game. The stands shake. In I can't remember. There were so many different stadia in Turkey that I've been to, but that was a very compact ground, and they kept the intimidating stuff is keeping it going, isn't it? I think that consistency. So I think Turkish football would be pride of place in many people's lists.
Yeah, well, I mean, the most intimidating I've ever been to is a game that a lot of Liverpool players say is the greatest atmosphere they've ever experienced. Jamie Carragher always says this, which is the 2005 second leg of the Champions League semi-final against Chelsea, the ghost goal as we call it, at the Chelsea end. But the whistling and the booing when Chelsea had any possession was like it was in the Turkey-Georgia game. It was absolutely brilliant. It was like something I've never heard at Anfield any other time. But I'm going to pick another game, which is the only other one that came anywhere near that. In 2003, in September, in Istanbul, there was a car bomb that exploded just outside the gates of the British Consulate General. 9 members of staff were killed, including the Consul General. Roger Short, remember him, and 2 local policemen and a visitor were among them. And as a result, there were no Champions League games held in Istanbul for that time being. And Chelsea were due to go and play Besiktas. And the game in the end got moved to match day 6 and was held in Gelsenkirchen in Germany. Which is Germany is an extraordinary country in that it's had a lot of population issues and a lot of lack of men for a long time. And in the 1960s and 70s, they started attracting Turkish workforce over. And loads of Turkish people went over to make their money, and loads didn't go back. And it's now considered there are 6 or 7 million Turkish people or Turkish-related people living in Germany.
İlkay Gündoğan,
captain now of Germany, and of course Mesut Ozil became a controversy because of his closeness to Erdogan, President Erdogan, the Turkish Islamist leader, who I think was best man at his wedding as well, Mesut Ozil. And the game was held in Gelsenkirchen, and I just thought it'd be a regular game. I didn't realise this extremism of Turkish presence in Germany. Gelsenkirchen holds about 55,000, and I reckon that there must have been 48,000 Turkish people in the stadium. I have never heard such noise, such support. It was absolutely brilliant. And I was live at half-time on Chelsea TV, and they had to cut it off because the sound of drums, and then there was a charge of fans, not a aggressive charge, but just like kittens running around having fun, just a charge of people enjoying themselves. And then it's very important in match day 6 in the Champions League that everyone kicks off at the same time so you don't get an advantage. But at half time, towards the beginning of the second half, the people behind one of the goals threw on so many streamers that the game was held up for 15 minutes. The second half didn't start for 15 minutes while the streamers were cleared off the pitch. It was the most amazing atmosphere. It was a little bit chilling, but it was mostly absolutely electrifying. And Chelsea won 2-0, so it was brilliant.
But that's exactly what happened with the Turkey-Georgia game. Yeah. It was 80% Turkish people, I think, in the ground, maybe more. I heard one of the commentators say 90%. And that connection between the two countries helped get Turkey across the line, because it was, we say again, we are here for the joy of football, and it was the best game in the stage of the Euros we've reached so far, but so much more to come, and hopefully more to come down the road between you and me.
Yeah, and I just want to mention before we leave that, because it can go over the top, and of course in 2001, 2001 season, 2 Leeds supporters were killed in violence, football violence. Kevin Spate and Christopher Loftus in Istanbul when Leeds went over there. So yeah, it can do. But I went to the old Galatasaray ground, the Stadium of Hell, and I came out of, when I arrived in Istanbul, I travelled with the team. I came out of the airport, and there were about 250 Galatasaray supporters outside with banners and everything, and they were just chatting friendlily to me, and it was great. And then the team came out and they absolutely mothered them and threw things and everything else, and as soon as the team had walked on and walked away, they're all in hysterics and high-fiving each other. It was theatre. It was nothing but theatre, and it was people enjoying their football. Right, that's it. Next up, with a live audience from Martin and me.
Hopefully see you then.
Try. Thanks for listening, watching. Next stop for us, live at John Lewis in Oxford Street. If you want to come and watch, join in, because there will be question answers and questions, no answers. Who knows? Statements. Just go on the links, you'll find it, or if not, go on Eventbrite and you'll find it there. But yeah, join us at John Lewis Thursday, June the 27th, 6 p.m. But you've got to buy a ticket, you've got to be a member of John Lewis. That's like a loyalty card. You just fill out a form, no payment, and let's have a glass or two of red, hey?